chapter 1, verse 47 to 49. When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Pardon me. Nathanael asked him, "From where do you know me to come?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Interesting. Consider several new translations here. New American Bible Revised Edition, John chapter 1, verses 48a. Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" NRSV, New Revised Standard Version, John 1:48a. Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" New International Version, John 1:48a. "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Sakrapaina John, translation of John 1:48a. Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" All these new translations here, "Where do you get to know me?" are completely anachronistic. It implies a modern type of social interaction in which individualist, introspective people get personally acquainted. A better translation of the Greek should read, "From where do you know me to come?" From where do you know me to come? Because if I know where you come from, I know you. That is, Nathanael assumes Jesus would know him if he knows where he is from. If Jesus, Middle Eastern, North African personality, can identify the place of Nathanael's origin, that would mean he knows all there is to know about him. Note that in John chapter 21, verse 2, we are told that Nathanael is from Cana, a small Galilean village near Nazareth. We're going to Cana pretty soon in the story. Stereotypes. Because collectivistic personalities are generally not interested in individuals, they tend to accept stereotypes as authentic and trustworthy assessments of people. If one were to read the gospel called Mark and jot down the names of the people Jesus healed, only one appears: Bartimaeus. Mark chapter 10, verse 46. But that's not really, Timaeus is not really the blind man's name, is it? That's his father's name, the patriarch of the household complex in which he lives with probably 50 to 100 people. Bartimaeus is Aramaic for son of Timaeus. So it's his father's name, the patriarch's name. This designation then, Bartimaeus of the blind man, reports his relationship within this family circle, this in-group. Consider also how few Pharisees are named in the Gospels. It's like if you meet one Pharisee, you've met them all, right? If you've met one person from Nazareth, you've met them all. If you've met one leper, you've met them all. Why should you name them? You only have to name one or designate one or distinguish one if one's like a Samaritan leper who's in the wrong place at the right time with a bunch of Israelite lepers, Judean lepers. Then you'd have to name him or make him stick out. But even then, he's a leper. And you meet one leper, you met all the lepers. References to the Pharisees are usually just to a Pharisee, right? Which Pharisee? For this reason, collectivistic personalities are also called sociocentric or group-centered personalities. They see their primary obligation to others in a group and are committed to the development of that group. Folks, everybody in the Bible, all the writers and all the characters, are collectivists. sociocentric, group-centered personalities. Not one single American individualist in the whole bunch. So it's very dangerous in many ways when Americans read the Bible, just by reading, because you open up the Bible and you expect to find Americans there. Got to watch your glasses reading the Bible. Let's talk about individualist personality types like us. The social analyst Gert Hofstede points out that individualism as a personality type is represented today among only 20% of the current population of planet Earth. The yellow represents those individualistic cultures. The red, like the part where the Bible comes from, and the Quran, represents collectivistic cultures. 20%, folks, that percentage is higher than it has ever been in human history. The individualist personality type believes that each person is unique and distinctive. In the United States, for example, no social security number has been or ever will be reused, at least according to current plans. Individualists believe that their primary responsibility is to themselves and to their individual potential. The legal system of the United States has already acknowledged the right of a minor child, for example, to disown or divorce her or his parents if they threaten her or his well-being or individual potential. You can take this as Tony Stark, Iron Man, or you can take this as Robert Downey Jr. It applies the same, however you want to interpret these images. Individualist personalities, whether they be Tony Stark in Marvel Comics or whether they be Robert Downey Jr. in Marvel Studios, believe that individual worth is based on individual achievements or individual possessions. Hence, one's personal status is achieved. Now, sure, you could be born in the wrong side of the tracks. You can have unfortunate things happen to you, yet still, you can pull yourself up by the bootstraps and change your personal status through your personal efforts and successes and all the things Hulk Hogan and Mr. T tell us. Say your prayers, eat your vitamins, stay in school, and all that. You can demonstrate those successes, document it on a resume, display it on a diploma, put on the vanity wall, and record it in your obituary. Thus, achieving and competing are motivational necessities and the norm in individualistic societies. And there is no individualistic society so individualistic as right here in the United States. In the history of planet Earth, individualists value independence very highly, and they put a premium on uniqueness. Individualists seek autonomy from social solidarity. If they do join a group, whether it's a family or a parish or Weight Watchers, it is on the basis of an implicit renewable contract. Everybody we're ministering to, everybody I'm looking at here at Bible Alive, you guys are very loyal to Bible Alive, and I appreciate that. But let's be honest. You came here with an implied renewable contract. Whether it be a group like this or Weight Watchers, individualists will remain with that group only so far as it suits their individual purposes, or they lose interest or motivation. Correct or not?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But you're all Christians. Okay, I believe you're Christians. I believe I'm Christian. But what a weird chimera we are, huh?
Shit happens and you can't make it.
Yeah, well, that's one thing, but we're not talking about that. That happens to everybody. That also happens to collectivists, and it's a great saying. But But I'm not talking about stuff happening.
Loyalty.
I'm talking about you lost interest. There's no losing interest to your group in the Mediterranean world.
Your group is your group.
That's where your identity, losing interest there is like losing your life. By the way, that's where the church comes from. All churches, by the way, come from that world. Okay? Communion. Not this private me and Jesus stuff. See, where does that come from? That comes from our world. Private, vertical me and Jesus. I can determine the Holy Spirit. That's not what Martin Luther was talking about. When Martin Luther was talking about the priesthood of all believers, he meant the priesthood of all believers in communion. In communion. He didn't mean the priesthood of the individual believer. Yeah.
The stress in our society is so focused on the individual interpersonal relationships that if a couple, like say a family were to join a church and the church were to get so big, they might actually just leave that church in search of a smaller church where they can have more intimate personal relationships.
Yeah, we need interpersonal relationship. We're not really focused on interpersonal relationship, but I agree with you that we are focused on the individual choice.
The individual.
Right.
Like they thrive on the individual.
Like that picture.
Not the group help, the group well-being.
Yeah, yes.
The same could be applied for a small class sizes for a college class.
That's absolutely right. Right on. Exactly right. We only belong to a gathering or group or collection insofar as it suits our personal need. Now, we can overcome some of these things, but try to understand that from the get-go, that is how we perceive reality. Collectivistic personality is very different. Hofstede's research discovered that the collectivistic personality type is represented again among 80% of the current population of planet Earth. This percentage was quite likely much higher in antiquity. Such people prefer to be identified by the major group to which they belong rather than be recognized as individuals. This is why appellations based on family belonging, such as son of Jonah, are so common in the Bible.
When we think about collectivism this way, if say somebody from India decides they're going to move to individualistic society, when they're leaving their group, their collectivistic group, that's a huge thing.
It's a huge thing.
But
Huge.
why would they ever do it?
Because survival is absolutely stressed to the max, and they're not leaving necessarily just as one person. They might be leaving, but they're still connected with their people back home whom they're working for. I know Indian people that have done this. They send money back home. They're trying to get them over here. They live with other Indians, all collected together in their same caste. I've seen this at the apartments of Vista Verde by FIU. I used to minister to Catholic people there that were Indian. And still the collectivism is there. You know? So we got to be careful superficially look. I mean, not you are doing that. Right. That was a great observation. But it's so easy to succumb to superficial examinations of these people and look for exceptions and not the rule. You know, and there's extreme situations brought on by survival, but even in that situation, it's not just the survival of the individual, it's the group. Yes?
Would you see, would you say
Usually.
this collectiveness, that they come here and they, help them back home, but when the other generation is born here, they tend to become more Americanized rather than be part of the collective?
Well said. That's because you can't survive here as a collectivist. Everything, you begin to be socialized and enculturated here. You begin to develop introspective thought. And with introspective thought, because of even the hardest worker here has leisure time. It's not like elsewhere in the world. So you begin to develop leisure time, and you begin to develop, and your perspective, you've moved away, geographic. What does that do to your brain? The perspective changes. Your reality changes. You understand? Trains, planes, and automobiles, they have changed the way we can perceive reality. I can get married to somebody 80 or 800 or 8,000 miles away from me. It didn't exist in the world before 1700, folks. So people reading the Bible after that time necessarily are going to be reading it very differently than all the people before. And yet we have to, Vatican II, baby, we have to get with the program. We have to come into the modern world. This is how it is. So as a result, for collectivists, the individual or personal worth of a collectivistic personality is rooted in his familial status, in her social position, in his or her status or caste. See? The one on the left is individualist. The one on the right, that means your worth is ascribed to you, not achieved. Hence, personal status is ascribed. That is, it derives principally from being born into a given family. If your father was a lowlife, then you're a lowlife, Jesus. You understand? Such a child immediately inherits all the family's honor, built up over generations, as well as all the family's enemies, built up over the generations.
But they also inherit the family's dishonor.
That's what I just said. That's right. Those enemies are trying to dishonor you, and you have to defend your family and its honor against those people. And in the Middle East, my friends, that agonistic culture, blood feud, and it's game over. All members of the household, the entire group, will be identified by the patriarch's name, Bartimaeus. Similarly, Jesus' clients are identified by their ailment. A man with an unclean spirit in Mark 1. What was his name? You ever wonder why the names aren't given? Because these are collectivists. No one in the first century would be asking that. Why isn't the name given? Because there's no individualists in them. See, we have names. You have families like the Julian family in Rome at that time. And all the daughters, guess what their name is? All 16 daughters. Julia. Because if you see one daughter of the Julian family, you've seen them all. They're collectivists. How many Marys are there in the Bible? Huh? These aren't a bunch of Italians like Joseph and Peter and Paul. You go to an Italian family. You go to their weddings. Peter, Paul, Joe. Peter, Paul, Joe. Peter, Paul. It's not the same thing, but even there, you still have hangover from the collectivism. Simon's mother-in-law, sick with a fever. What's her name? She's the one sick with the fever. A leper. Meet one leper, you meet them all. To know one in a category is to know all others in that category. What more information need be given? Similar stereotypes attach to places and the people who inhabit them. Listen, this is the Bible, folks. Titus chapter 1, verses 12 to 13. The pastor writes, all inhabitants of the island of Crete are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. The testimony is true. What would you say that the pastor was? If we brought the pastor today, you'd say he's a bigot, right? Can you imagine if you said all people from this island are like always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons? This testimony is true. Think about that.
The hater.
Let's say somebody came out here in the church. I don't agree with this. I live there, but okay, let's say all inhabitants of Lauderhill are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. What would people immediately think that if I said that? Bill's a racist.
They're haters.
And a hater. But it's okay for Titus, the author of Titus?
But I guess it's acceptable in that time.
It's a different, they're perceived, everybody thought like that then. Everybody thought all Samaritans were the same. Okay? It's not the same thing as our world. We can't be forgiving with our world because we have the opportunity to see things differently, come out of our shell, right? And get sensitive to the other. But I want you to see how it is. Peoples are stereotyped here. They're collectivists. Recall Nathanael's reaction when he learns that Jesus is from Nazareth. John 1:46. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? If you meet a Nazarite's something different. If you meet a Nazarene, you've met all Nazarenes. There's only like 200 of them anyway. And they're all the same. Low-lifes, peasants. Most of their land has already been taken from them. They couldn't even defend the honor of their land from the elites, the greedy elites. Or again, the editorial comment in the Johannine story of Jesus meeting the Samaritan woman at the well in John chapter 4, verse 9. For Judeans, notice how stereotyped this is, for Judeans have no dealings with Samaritans. Right. Which means that the story should be shocking. It doesn't shock you and me when we read that story, because we love Jesus, and we've got this image of Jim Caviezel sitting down talking with a woman, like having coffee talk with her. That story should be slapping us upside the head going, this is shocking! Because Judeans have nothing to do, nothing in common with Samaritans. And it's a woman! And it's a woman who's even a dishonored Samaritan. And at a well, which is a vaginal symbol in the world of the Bible. What's being implied? Conservative Christians would never write the Bible. Never write the Bible. The stereotype is not always pejorative, however. When he identified his place of origin, the Lucan Paul said, Acts chapter 21:39, Paul answered, I am a Judean of Tarsus in Cilicia, a resident of no mean city, meaning it's a great city. I request you to permit me to speak to the people. I have to say Lucan Paul because, you know, Luke is kind of like the David Axelrod for Paul, or the James Carville for Paul. And like James Carville is to Bill Clinton, and like David Axelrod was to Barack Obama, so Luke is to Paul. Yeah.
Isn't it the same?
Make him look good. Yes, but that name change, actually no, there is no, that's a great example, Rose, of spurious familiarity. So just like Peter was Simon and then he became Peter, right? No, it's not the way it is with Paul. What happens with Paul is, probably Paul was born in Gishala in Upper Galilee, and with a family of zealots. They didn't pay their taxes. They got shipped off as slaves to Tarsus when Paul was about 4, maybe. And he's living in the Greco-Mediterranean world, and so from the very earliest days, he has 2 names. He has an outsider name, Paulus, and he has an inside name, Shaul. And Shaul means to ask, and it refers to also similar to Sheol, the pit. Like King Saul asked to speak to Samuel, who was in Sheol. See? To ask. But anyway, the closest thing Greek has to Saul is Saulus. And Saulus is he who waddles. It's like pato in Spanish. You all know what pato really means in Spanish, right? Like a duck, pato. It's like a derogatory comment for somebody like a homosexual. So he who waddles like a prostitute is what Saulus kind of means. Mm-hmm. And so that's not going to work. So he's got to have a public name, and that wasn't too good either, Paulus, which means small. So, but that's it. He has his outside name and his inside name. Our Jewish brothers and sisters still have this to this day. Everybody knows Bob. Bob's a great guy. Bob's cool. Bob works down at the TV store, or at the insurance place. This is a story that comes from Dr. John Pilch. Everybody loves Bob, but then Bob's Jewish. So one day, Dr. Pilch asks him, Bob, your real name's not Bob. What's your real name? Back home, your private name. Samuel. That's his private name. That's what it is with Paul. Paul never got a name change. That's spurious familiarity. Show me in the story where it says his name changed. It doesn't change. He always had those 2 names. And when he goes around in the Mediterranean world, it makes sense for him to use the Greek name, to use the Mediterranean name. And that's what happens. Do we want to take a break? Click it and then... Okay.